All right, good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining today's webinar, Bandura and Domain Tools, Drilling Malware, Phishing, and Spam Threats. We're really excited about today's webinar. I'm Todd Weller, the Chief Revenue Officer for Bandura. It's my pleasure to have Tim Helmling, Security Evangelist for Domain Tools. Tim, thanks a bunch for joining us.
You got it, Todd. Great to be here. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Great. From an agenda perspective, I'm going to do a few things today. We're going to introduce you to the Bandura Cyber Intelligence Marketplace, and then really do a nice deep dive on Domain Tools, and then we'll do some Q&A. So again, we're excited. Thanks for joining us. Let's kick it in. So from a Bandura perspective, we're all about making autonomous cyber intelligence and defense accessible to everybody. And we do it through one easy to deploy cloud-based solution. So there's really three things we do really, really well. First, we make the world's leading cyber intelligence accessible to everyone in real time. We simplify the deployment of that intelligence with automation, and then we allow you to defend your network with it. That's to use that intelligence to take action with it in an automated way to protect your network. When you look at our platform, there's a couple of major components to what we're doing here. First, we're aggregating and integrating cyber intelligence in the cloud, whether that's the tens of millions of IP and domain indicators we're providing out of the box through great partnerships we have with folks like Domain Tools. We're also incorporating in some open source intelligence, government, but then we're also making it easy for you to integrate IP and domain indicators from any source. So that could be a custom source you have, an IP block list, a domain block list, getting that in via a text file over HTTPS with one of our connectors, a CSV connector or STIX-TAXI. Industry threat intelligence is very critical. So making it easy for you to pull in intelligence from ISACs and ISAOs, if you're a member, to more formal integrations, like with threat intelligence platforms like Anomaly or Threat Connect, for example. So we aggregate and integrate all of that threat intelligence from those sources in the cloud. The user then interfaces with our Bandura app to set policies, activate the list, and then our cloud service is sending the policies as well as all that threat intelligence down to our threat blockers. Our threat blockers sit inline on a network, and they look at the inbound and the outbound traffic, and they make an allow or deny decision based off of all that threat intelligence. They could also do it based on GeoIP, what country, or what network based on autonomous system number. And threat blockers you can deploy on-prem, whether it's on a physical appliance or virtually via VMware or KVM. You can deploy them in the cloud, AWS and Azure, or we also have an as-a-service offering called Threat Blocker Anywhere for remote users. Our threat blockers also provide lots of great data about what's happening on the network, including if an indicator, for example, is blocked because it's on a Domain Tools domain hot list or IP hot list, it's going to show you that great info in the logs, and you can easily export that great data out via syslog to SIM or syslog of your choosing. As mentioned, Domain Tools is a key partner, and we're really excited. They've been a longstanding partner for us. We believe that data is critical, right? We're not in the business of producing our own cyber intelligence. It's folks like Domain Tools that are specialists in producing that intelligence, and that's why we're really pleased to partner. And here again, we think defending against threats is a volume game, and you need to use a diverse mix of cyber intelligence from multiple sources. And that's why we're very much an open platform partnering with lots of different providers. So threat intelligence, or the Bandura Cyber Intelligence Marketplace, really fits in with this strategy. We launched this about a month ago. We've seen great reception from our customers, great adoption so far. Cyber Intelligence Marketplace is a place you can go via the Bandura app, or as we call it, GMC, to easily discover, evaluate, and acquire cutting-edge cyber intelligence. You can also benefit from one place to go for curation and management of all your cyber intelligence. So you're going to see kind of the functionality of this evolve over time. Importantly, it's a place where you can instantly deploy that data across your network in real time to help you increase protection. Because at the end of the day, that's what cyber intelligence is all about. It's taking action with it. It's doing something with it to protect yourself. As I mentioned, Domain Tools has been a long-time partner. We're going on 2+ years of a great partnership here. We've had a domain hot list that we've offered to customers. That was kind of our initial offering. that consists of 3 million domains approximately that have a DomainTools risk score of 99 out of 100. We're excited about the IP hot list. That's what we're going to learn more about today. This is a new cyber intelligence feed that DomainTools just launched, so it's hot off the presses. And you're going to see, while domains are very important, it's also important to understand what IP addresses those domains map to or resolve to. And that's what the IP hot list is all about. And that's what Tim is going to dig into deep and do a deep dive on. So with that, love to pass it over to Tim. Tim, tell us more about yourself, and we're excited to learn about the hot list.
Great. Thank you, Todd. And let me echo what Todd has said. This partnership has been terrific for us as well. And some of the feedback that we've received from Bandura as we developed the products that we've got integrated was very valuable to us in helping with the tuning and tweaking and really making these as rock solid as we feel that they are at this point. So a little quick bit about me. I've been doing InfoSec for quite a while on the vendor side of things, worked for a firewall company for quite a while, DomainTools for about 7 years, spent some time also in the ICS and OT, industrial control systems and OT security space as well. Spend a lot of time in product management as well as product marketing. And now what I do as a quote unquote evangelist is a lot of internal and external education on security best practices, on the offerings that we have at DomainTools, et cetera. When I say internal, some of that is inward facing to our organization, helping get folks up to speed on some of what's going on out in the world of security. And I have all kinds of interests outside of work stuff. So if anything on there looks interesting to you, hit me up on one of the connections that's shown there. All right, Todd, let's jump to the next one. So a little bit about the company, about DomainTools. We have been around for around 20 years. An interesting tidbit about this is that actually at the beginning, DomainTools was not originally founded as a cybersecurity company, strangely enough. It was, and the reason I'm going to say this is because it lays a little bit of the foundation for what we've got. It was created originally as a tool for folks who were buying and selling domain names, domain name investors who were, kind of part of that gold rush during the .com era where folks made a lot of money buying and selling domain names. And they needed a resource for being able to get in touch with other holders of domains, either to buy holdings off of them or to try to sell things that they thought that person might be interested in. And so they started collecting whois records at an increasingly large scale. And importantly, more than whois records, they started gathering other data, metadata kind of surrounding domains. So hosting, what IPs they were on, that was a critical part of it, but also grabbing screenshots and certain other kind of content that they would scrape from those domains. All of this went into the database and they never threw anything away. So the result of that was that by the time the company was, around 10 years old, they started getting calls from interested prospects who were not using DomainTools for buying and selling domains, but were using it for security purposes to better understand who the adversaries were that were creating online infrastructure and being able to get context on that so they knew what to do about it. And so a little less than 10 years ago, the company just pivoted, decided to pivot entirely into the security space, and we've never looked back. So our customers, quite a broad reach of customer folks, mostly large enterprise companies, but increasingly some of the smaller companies are starting to take advantage of what we're doing as well, because it turns out to be applicable to absolutely everybody. And one of the exciting things about working with Bandura is it's a way to take our data and make it immediately consumable and actionable in the mainstream of what a lot of customers do with DomainTools. It has more to do with forensics, investigations, things like that. Here's a way you can take the data and sort of cut to the chase in terms of enforcement or alerting. Let's jump to the next one. So Something that a lot of folks don't realize is that there is no official global database with all the information about every domain that's in existence. Even ICANN doesn't have a database like that. DomainTools is the closest thing to it. And we built that up over the years with a variety of technologies that help us acquire and process the data. When I first saw the equivalent of this slide when I joined the company years ago, I said, help me put these numbers in perspective. I don't know, these seem like big numbers, they seem like good numbers, but who knows, right? And basically it turns out that there is no other source that comes particularly close to the depth and breadth that we've got here, because we've spent so much time kind of building the machine that processes and provides all of this data. Some of the numbers that you see on this come from important partnerships that we have with passive DNS providers, such as Farsight Security. They're the best in the business at that particular discipline. And all of this builds together into the data sources that let us make informed judgments about the goodness or badness of a particular domain, and by extension, the IPs that they're on. So let's go to the next one. So, in many cases, and Bandura happily is kind of a nice exception to this, but in many cases, network defense is reactive. This is not an indictment here. It's kind of how it works. In other words, what I'm specifically talking about is we know there's badness out there. There are a lot of really good sources of threat intelligence. Most of them are based on observations of badness. So somebody gets hit with something, it gets reported, it gets added to a block list, and folks are protected. But notice in there is somebody that has to get hurt, and it's usually more than one somebody that has to get hurt before the domain or IP lands on that block list, and the infrastructure is essentially burned for the adversary, and then they have to move on to something else. We saw in the vastness of kind of all the data on 390 or so million domains in existence, that there were patterns in there that we could take advantage of to help predict where badness lurks on the internet. So let's look at the next one. And so all these little dots sort of represent domains that are out there on the internet. There's an overall kind of summary on the left of the different kinds of data that it is that we collect. So back in the day, we were often known as a Whois company, and kind of one of the premier providers of Whois data. In reality, even back then, but especially now, there was a lot of other data that we grabbed besides just the registration records, besides Whois records. And so all these different sorts of data get cross-indexed in our database, and we build associations from one thing to another, finding these links between domains and the infrastructure that they're on. All of that helps us, it provides ways for us to score the relative risk level of a domain. I'm going to go into more detail in a couple of slides about how that works. So I won't go deep on it just yet, but essentially by making those connections and by understanding the nature of these domains, we can pretty clearly not just see what a domain is connected to, that's really important for the investigative, forensic, et cetera, approach, or for security researchers who are trying to understand networks of badness out there. But also just to characterize domains, because when you're looking at millions and millions of them, there are things that are going to start to leap out at you, and that can also be captured on an automated level or a machine learning level that say, yeah, this is a pattern that we kind of recognize. And so we can predict that this domain looks like it's going to be bad. So let's go on to the next one. You've probably seen there are a lot of jokes that go around about how it's always DNS. My favorite haiku in cybersecurity is, it's not DNS. There's no way it's DNS. It was DNS. So it's kind of so much of what goes on obviously comes back to this system. And Adversaries, just like legitimate users or providers of content, are part of the DNS system. And so if you imagine a malicious domain that's going to be used, for example, for phishing, there on the left, similar to what you saw a couple minutes ago, there's all this kind of data that we collect about this domain. As the domain comes into existence, there are certain things that it has, characteristics that it has as soon as it's registered. There are other characteristics that it quickly acquires in terms of where it's hosted, what the hosting provider looks like, and then what kind of content is actually put up onto that domain. Then, by using passive DNS with a worldwide sensor network, we're able to quickly track when the domain is receiving traffic. And those ingredients become part of the risk score, which allows us to create alerting and for folks that are using it in a blocking context to be able to block. Or in the case of email, like for phishing, one of the cool things about email security, of course, is that there's a spectrum of responses that you can have. So you can say, well, if a score is in this range, we're going to block the email outright. If it's in the slightly lower range, we're going to quarantine it, et cetera. So you have kind of these varieties of responses that you can take. Web traffic's a little more kind of black and white. Either we're going to allow or we're going to deny. But anyway, that's a kind of how DNS is just part of, it's integral to everything, obviously, that happens on the internet. And that includes how you conduct some evaluations of whether something's bad or not. So let's jump to the next one. We have built a lot of data science around this gold mine of data that we have. And so it's allowed us to produce insights. It's allowed us to make informed judgments about the nature of something. And this, what you're seeing here, applies to, there are examples where we integrate with different kinds of systems. And from the DFIR kind of point of view, or incident response or security analysts, looking at SIM and TIP and SOAR type systems allows analysts to make good decisions about what it is that they're looking at, to get some better situational awareness, better context on a domain that may have triggered some kind of alert, or it showed up in the system in one way or another, with a bit of an unknown sense of whether it's malicious or not. So a lot of our customers who are using Bandura and are taking advantage of the automated nature of how our hot lists work in Bandura are also using DomainTools independently on the investigative side, using our Iris platform or our Iris API or our fisheye tool, that all help with different phases of kind of investigating and dispositioning domains that come up, or IPs now, that come up as question marks and need to be evaluated. So jumping to the next one. A little bit about the platform. So on the left is just a more detailed look at some of the different kinds of information, the ingredients that go into this data repository, where we do make these associations and connections and whatnot. And that becomes part of the risk analysis that we do, which flows out to different use cases. I've mentioned incident response a number of times. Overall risk assessment is one of them. We have a lot of folks that are using it from a brand protection standpoint, using our tools to find spoof domains that are spoofing their own holdings. And then for threat hunting, that may not be immediately intuitive how that plays in here. But when you think about hunting out on adversary infrastructure, if you imagine that you have a domain that somehow has touched your network and you know that it's malicious, then finding out what it's connected to turns out to be pretty valuable from a hunting point of view, because it allows you, if you find out that this malicious domain is tied to 20 other domains that you have high confidence are connected to it, are related, probably being operated by the same actor, then you might want to defensively put either blocks or certainly put alert rules in place for those other 20 domains that are connected to the first one, because they may be sort of lying dormant, waiting to be activated, or they may be part of a larger campaign that is set up and waiting to be operational. So that first one that you saw domains are almost never lone wolves in terms of being part of malicious activity. They usually are part of a much larger campaign. And so there's ways of doing threat hunting on adversary infrastructure that help really put you in a better position to be able to defend against those larger connected threats. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, let's go a little deeper on the risk scoring, because this is really central to the domain and IP hot lists. And the hot lists themselves are actually very straightforward. So there's not a great deal of detail to go into with respect to the hot lists, especially if you're using them in the context of Bandura. I just want to be able to provide the background so you understand how they're built. So there are two main parts of the scoring that we do. One of them we call threat profile, and one of them that we call proximity. Proximity is actually the older one. So even though it's not on the left, I'll start with that one. Proximity is based on, it's a score that's derived from looking at the connections between a domain and other domains that are known to be bad. So we have some providers that we work with that provide block lists. We can't name them for contract reasons, but you've heard of all of them, and they're well vetted. And when we know that a domain is confirmed to be bad, proximity looks at what attributes it shares with other domains. So if you have an IP address that has a bad domain on it, and it turns out it's got a bunch of other bad domains on it, then when it gets a new domain pointed to it, there's a much higher likelihood that that new domain is also bad, because you've really found a piece of infrastructure that that an adversary is using. But other things can be used in the same way. So maybe it's the name server that has a large population of bad domains on it, or an SSL cert that connects a bunch of domains, some of which have already been convicted. Proximity scores how closely the domain is connected to known badness. Now, moving back to the left a little bit, threat profile, that works completely differently, because you can imagine with proximity, if I'm a bad guy and I know about something like this proximity scoring, I can take a domain and stand it up on totally clean infrastructure and avoid getting scored high on proximity. We knew that from the beginning. Threat profile, we hired data scientists who built machine learning classifiers that were trained on corpuses of known malware, phishing, and spam domains. And so they iterated and developed these classifiers so that we could take unknown domains and show them to the classifier and say, does this have attributes that are consistent with domains that we know are malware, we know are phishing, we know are spam? So supervised learning, you're probably familiar with, but that's what those classifiers are in threat profile. So there's a little sampling of some of the kinds of data that go into the classifiers in order to generate a threat profile score. So proximity just tells you, we think it's bad. It's silent on the question of what kind of badness, but threat profile says, yeah, this looks a lot like a phishing domain. It looks a lot like a malware domain. It looks a lot like a spam domain. And so by extension, when you understand those ingredients of the kind of the badness profile of a domain, it allows you to detect lots of different kinds of threats. Obviously, the phishing, malware, and spam themselves, but by extension, that means a lot of spoof domains are going to show up in there. A lot of command and control for different kinds of malware, ransomware, what have you, are all going to show up as part of that kind of profile. So this sorts out domains that don't have any evidence of badness to domains that are known to be bad, and in between, a spectrum of scoring that gives us the overall risk score for the domain. So those are the ingredients behind the hot lists. So let's go to the next one and talk a little bit more specifically about IP hot list and IP risk feed. Domain hot lists, because it's not new, I don't have a specific slide about it, but domain hot list quickly is, as Todd mentioned, a set of about 3 million domains that have the highest predictive score in our scoring mechanism, which is 99. So those domains are exceedingly likely to be bad. Confidence is extremely high that they're bad. They just haven't yet landed on actual block lists. They probably will, unless some of their supporting infrastructure gets burned before the adversary even has a chance to use them. Now, as soon as we developed our domain risk scoring, we started getting questions from folks who said, hey, that's interesting, that's cool. I like being able to identify bad domains. But what about IP addresses? And it made sense that they would ask that for a variety of reasons. Like, part of it is certain parts of the security ecosystem don't talk domains, they just talk IPs. If you think about a firewall for most ports and protocols, it just knows about IP addresses. For some protocols, it does know about domains, especially if it's like a next-gen type firewall where it can say, okay, this is an HTTP proxy and it's looking at this URL, and now I can extract the domain name out of that and figure out things about whether it's likely to be bad or not. Likewise with SMTP, but for a lot of protocols, IP is kind of the coin of the realm. So that's one of the reasons we knew that we needed to develop kind of IP risk scoring. And the other just has to do with the fact that when you think about where the threat comes from, it's most often going to be traffic that actually is outbound from your environment, because you have defenses against, bad guys that are throwing traffic at you from an IP address out there, where the IP address is the source of their badness. There are a lot of tools that take care of that. And that's not how most attacks usually occur. There are some exceptions, like a DDoS attack is that. It's bad IP addresses firing traffic at the victim. But more often, if you think about ransomware, you think about phishing, you think about the threats that are most prevalent, there's a part of that process where there's traffic from your protected environment out to some IP address. And so that's where a lot of the risk lies. So what we did with the IP hot list and the IP risk feed, it's the IP hot list that's part of our integration with Bandura. The IP risk feed is something that we have available separately. I'll explain the difference in a second. But it is based on the domains that are on those IPs, because guess what? When the traffic is going out from the protected environment to an IP address, typically something told it about a domain, and that's what it's actually reaching out to. There are malwares that are going out to hard-coded IP addresses, but that's not super common. If you think about it, if you are the author of a piece of malware and the IP addresses are hard-coded in that malware, then if those IP addresses get burned, you've got to spin up a new version of your malware, right? So on the other hand, if it's connecting to IPs, rather to domains, then there are ways that those can be looked up, that new lists of domains can be generated by domain generation algorithms and whatnot. If they're using fast flux with name servers, they have much more flexibility if they're connecting, if their malware connects out on the basis of a domain. So by scoring those domains, it allows us to infer the nature of the IP address. And so IP hot list is a hot list of domains that have high scoring, IPs that have high scoring, they have populations of high scoring domains on them. So they're sort of the bad neighborhoods of the internet. If you want to think about it that way, it's risky areas because of the domains that are on them. Because of this nature of the way that so much of the threatware out there works, the domains turn out to be an extremely useful way to characterize how neutral or how bad an IP address is. And so that's how we developed the hot list. And it's kind of why we developed the hot list, because we recognized there was a need to be able to characterize and disposition IP addresses. And so that's what we've done, and with a lot of great support from Bandura, we really tuned it to the point where we feel very confident in the accuracy, in the low false positive rate, et cetera, for this IP hot list. And that was really important to us because obviously, you can't have business disrupted by block rules that are blocking legitimate sites. The patterns of badness, when you study how malicious actors use internet infrastructure, it turns out that these patterns are very useful in predicting whether something's going to be bad. So if an IP has a bunch of bad domains on it, there's very little chance that it also has domains that somebody in your organization needs to get to. And so that lets us, with high confidence, say these IP addresses are ones that you want to stay away from, or at minimum, at least send an alert so that you can take a closer look, because likely something not so great is going on there. So if you go to the next one, this is the last slide I specifically have. Just the bottom line, we commissioned a study asking our customers, what does it mean for you to have access to the data that we provide and the tools that illustrate those connections and characterizations and whatnot of that infrastructure. And these statistics across the top come from those responses from folks. It really is a difference maker in terms of overall improving the efficacy of their security operations. So those are ingredients that are part of the kind of the other tools that we have independently, our Iris platform, et cetera, like I mentioned before. But those good results speak to the power of the predictive work that we've done in order to provide predictive risk scoring for domains and IPs. And that's what brings us up to where we are right now. So Todd, let me turn things back over to you.
Great, Tim. Thanks for that. And it's great to see all what goes into, the great cyber intelligence that you all produce. A lot of times people see just the end result, like you mentioned, it's the IP hot list or the domain hot list. So really understanding what it takes to get those indicators onto a list. There's a lot that goes into it. And that's, what the value of a great cyber intelligence provider like DomainTools, what you all provide. So in a few minutes, we're going to open up to questions. If you have a question, use the Q&A function. Just hit that button and let us know. I'll spend just a few minutes here showing you how you can access DomainTools on Bandura Cyber Intelligence Marketplace. It's really easy. As a Bandura customer, you've been interfacing with our platform through what we call GMC or our Bandura app. You'll see kind of on the left menu when you log in, Marketplace with a red kind of symbol there with new. Simply click on Marketplace. You're going to go in there and you're going to see two great offerings from DomainTools. So you got a domain hot list, which we mentioned, and also the new DomainTools IP hot list. So really a great 1-2 punch there, right? One, a list of domains that are have a very high probability of being weaponized in the near term. And then on the IP hot list side, you have IPs associated with malicious domains that are operationalized. So click on either of those. If you don't have domain hot list, you should absolutely go get that one. IP hot list is new, so new for many of our customers. So you just go out there, click IP hot list. You're going to click that. It's going to take you here. You're going to press subscribe. One thing to note here, I should have put a big red circle around it, but I did not. But one cool thing about DomainTools, whether it's the domain hot list or the IP hot list, it's free. So for all of our customers, it's part of your Bandura subscription. So our marketplace has a mix of premium and other types of offerings, but we've got a great relationship with DomainTools, and we're providing this as part of our Bandura subscription. So all you have to do is go out marketplace, click on the DomainTools, come here, click subscribe. Then you're going to go to the next screen, and you're just simply going to click enroll. And after you do that, you're going to see the hot list populate. And again, you can do this for both the IP hot list and the domain hot list, and they're going to show up in your IPv4 denied list and your domain denied list. And it's really simple and easy. So to summarize today, as I mentioned earlier, defending against today's threat is a volume game, and that requires organizations use both cyber intelligence and automation to scale their security efforts. And again, you saw a lot of great value as far as what DomainTools is doing out there. At Bandura, we're really focused on allowing customers to easily access, deploy, and enforce using massive volume of cyber intelligence from best-in-class sources. And Cyber Intelligence Marketplace provides our customers a great mechanism to have access to high-quality data from leading providers. And again, I think Tim it was really phenomenal to better understand everything that goes into the great data that DomainTools provides. And again, it's easy to kind of see it's a list of bad things, but as you saw, there's a lot of data and analytics and experience that goes into generating that and having the confidence that it's bad, while also mitigating risk associated with false positives. And so DomainTools is a great feed, a great source of cyber intelligence that really helps protect our customers from malware, phishing, spam threats, and other types of threats. So with that, we're going to move to Q&A. I do have a question that popped up here. So Tim, I'll read it. This is going to be for you. When DomainTools transitioned to the hot list, their domain threat feed entries were significantly reduced, went from around 13 million entries to 3 million plus. Can Tim explain what was updated and changed with their feed?
Yeah, absolutely. And Rudy, thank you for that question. And actually, this is not a plant, I promise, but it's a really important question because one of the points that I didn't emphasize as much, I touched on it, but is, remember I mentioned passive DNS and one of the slides showed passive DNS recent activity. So what we wanted to do is we know that there are a lot of domains that are bad and they were created for malicious purposes, but some of them are getting traffic, some of them are operationalized, and some of them are maybe more dormant. So the hot list says it's the intersection of, we know that the nature of the domain is bad, but which ones are actually hot right now, which ones are receiving traffic, and that's a much smaller set. And so that's the difference between the hot lists and the larger risk feeds that we have. The larger risk feeds encompass domains that may be lying dormant right now. They haven't actually been put into operation by the controllers of them, whereas the hot lists say, let's look at passive DNS, and if it's received traffic in the last 24 hours, we consider it hot, and so therefore it goes onto the hot list. And so the IP hot list, it sort of works the same way. For an IP to land on that hot list, the domains on the IP both have to be bad and be receiving traffic in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, and one of the things we've definitely seen, and I think this is a great practice by all cyber intel providers, is tuning happens. So we've seen this not just from DomainTools, but other providers as well, where a threat feed used to be of a certain size, but they go through and tune analytics and make changes to machine learning algorithms, and that kind of the overall goal to kind of improve the quality of kind of detection. So cyber intelligence is volume's important in terms of diversity, but ultimately quality is, I like to say, quality is job one. And I think that was the key factor kind of in the domain kind of hot list aspect of things.
Yeah, and it totally depends on the use case, because from a DFIR point of view, or when you're doing adversary threat hunting, you actually want that aperture open wider to the ones that aren't necessarily receiving traffic, but that are part of a campaign, because they may be something that's going to be spun up tomorrow and are going to be active. But from the standpoint, for the use case that says, what do I need to block right now? What do I need to alert on right now? That's where the hot list comes in.
All right, so we got another question. So for IP hot list, there's a threshold setting, right, that says, like, to be on the IP hot list, over 50% of the domains associated with that IP have to be malicious. So why 50%? Why not 75%, or what happens if it was 40%? Why 50%?
Yep. Yeah. So great question. So that's exactly part of that tuning process that you just talked about. We could have set that threshold anywhere, and we did some experimentation, and we looked at for the domains that don't rise to the level of maliciousness that outright says they're either known to be bad or the predictive score is super high. Some of those domains aren't receiving traffic. So you could have an IP address, for example, that has where every domain on it is bad, but only some of them are receiving any traffic. So only some of them get there's a double trigger for whether the domain or whether the IP is considered hot, right? The domains have to be malicious and they have to be active in the last 24 hours. So what we found is that if the number of domains that meet those criteria is at 50% or higher on that IP address, there's nothing good in that other 50% on the IP. The false positive rate for that is very low. It's more commonly, it's just that the other 50% on the IP are perhaps attack infrastructure that's dormant right now, or domains that are sort of sketchy in one way or another, but they're not receiving traffic, or they're not quite as they haven't quite gotten to the risk score threshold that says they're super high confidence bad. And so we just experimented, and again, Bandura was super helpful in this, saying, hey, in testing this and looking it over and doing some research on the IPs that actually make it into the hot list, the answer was, yep, that looks good. It looks like that's an appropriate threshold for putting it on the list. It's going to catch a lot of badness, and it's not going to cause headaches in terms of accidentally blocking legit sites.
Great. And a question, looks like we have another question here.
Yeah. If we identify a new spoofing domain, does DomainTools have a submission process we can submit the threat to as part of our response or takedown procedures? So if you get in touch with us with those domains, yeah, absolutely. We can at least provide more information about it. Now, we don't participate in those takedown procedures, but the way the question is phrased, it sounds like that's something you're doing, but you can report it to us. If you just contact information at or info@domaintools.com, we certainly are happy to take those. Most of the domains that are predicted or likely to be spoofing or bad, they're going to receive high risk scores anyway, and a lot of them go on to get blocked on block lists, but we definitely welcome any kind of submissions like that.
Awesome. So question we didn't get today, which we often get with the marketplace, is around kind of trials. So just want to give folks an update there that, very shortly, next few weeks, you'll be seeing kind of that capability added. It'll allow you to go out and try the different feeds. Cool thing is with DomainTools, again, it's part of your subscription, so there's no cost to do it. So just go out there and take advantage of that as soon as possible. So with that, Tim, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to give us the deep dive on DomainTools and everything you guys are doing on the DNS intelligence front that flows into the hot list we're providing to customers.
You got it, Todd. Thanks so much, and thanks for your partnership. And everybody, thanks for joining today. We are so happy to make this happen.
And just in closing, a couple of additional resources folks can go to. So you can visit banduracyber.com. A blog we published yesterday on announcing kind of IP hot list and some high level information there. There's a great blog from last week where Pat, our CTO, participated with DomainTools in a webinar DomainTools did to unveil and go through IP hot list. And there's more great detail there. There's our integrations page. You can check out kind of integrations commercial, and you'll see DomainTools and more information there. So a lot of great information there. And again, as always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to your contact at Bandura. So with that, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you are, and look forward to catching up soon.